Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here on this lovely, magical island. And I felt it as soon as my feet touched the ground. It's my first time here. I'd like to link what I'm about to say to the speakers who have talked about mindfulness, because we take mindfulness very seriously at Biocybernaut. We put people in soundproof chambers after putting gold disc electrodes on their heads to pick up their brainwaves. Soundproof chambers which exceed the standards of quietness of most recording studios. We make it completely dark, and then we give people musical sounds, the loudness of which is driven by brain activity at selected sites on their head in different kinds of trainings. And so as I'll go into this, I want to dedicate this talk to Mark Wynn and his Dandelion project, who so kindly invited me here, and to my father, Dr. Victor Henry Hardt, who played every Western instrument and was a symphonic band and choir director, and who educated me in the appropriate use of the baton. I don't have a baton, but Mark provided this surrogate this morning. We're going to speak of superior wellness and thriving in mind, body, spirit, and emotions. Now, although I began the talk at a rather languid pace, I'm going to accelerate to a very rapid pace in order to get through the abundance of material I wish to share with you today. I am going to make this slide presentation available to anyone who wants it, and embedded in some of the PowerPoint slides are PDF documents which allow you to read deeper into the material. And so in some cases I'll be zipping through the slides, knowing that if you wish, you can view them later at a more leisurely pace. Turning the tide on the Western mental health epidemic is one of the single biggest challenges in the world today, said Mark. And this Saturday, we have a conference. Its aim is to resolve mental health as a societal problem and to create the happiest country on Earth. And toward the end of my talk, I'll give you the biocybernaut solution to that. The goal and mission of Biocybernaut is to usher in an enduring golden age for all humanity and to activate, turn on, and awaken the global brain of all humanity. Those of you who know the work of Peter Russell will know what I'm speaking about when I mention the global brain. We at Biocybernaut are helping people to be happier, have less suffering, forgive deeply, heal their traumas, be smarter. 1 week of the training, average increase in IQ is 11.7 points. The creativity boost averages 50%. Improve all your relationships, including your personal and sexual relationships. Expand spiritual awareness and experience non-duality and ASCs, or altered states of consciousness. Brainwaves rule. If I were a teenager, I would say the theme of this talk is that brainwaves rule. One, integrating methodology. We, of course, have heard and will hear about psychopharmaceuticals, neurotherapy, psychotherapy, entheogens, counseling, meditation, fasting, prayer. Might want to add sex and tantra to that. But the psychophysiological principle that we teach is that any experience that you have as a living human being, you have this only when you have a certain pattern of brainwaves. And if you can change your brainwaves, either with a drug or fasting or meditation or tantra or brainwave feedback, you will change your experiences. Fundamentally, you can change who you are at an identity level. This was quite a shocker to the psychiatric community when, as a young assistant professor in the psychiatry department of the University of California Medical Center, I put up on the screen examples of the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory given to people 7 or 8 days apart, showing massive and profound reduction in psychopathologies because I had taught them to change their brainwaves. Now, this assertion, and it is that, the psychophysiological principle, one way to, in rhetoric and logic, to assess the validity of a proposition is called reductio ad absurdum. So let's take it to the extreme. If brainwaves stop or flatline, then you cease having the experiences of a living human being. So at least it passes that test. My assertion that any experience that you have as a human being, you have only when you have a certain pattern of brainwaves. You can view all methods, whether it's giving drugs or mindfulness training or any kind of intervention, it is effective only when you succeed, when that intervention succeeds in changing the brainwaves. What we're talking about here this day in Guernsey is healing by retraining your brain. Biocybernaut brain training heals body, mind, emotions, and spirit. Here's a slide you can read later about Biocybernaut, here about yours truly. An introduction to brainwaves would include, we work with delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma brainwaves. And these are related in sort of typical neurological medical parlance to, for example, delta is coma and deep sleep, stages 3 and 4, but the experience of Kundalini is also had only when someone has massive, coherent, waking delta waves. Similarly, theta is seen in light sleep, hypnagogic and hypnopompic imagery, trance states accessing the Akashic records, but it was also used before CAT scans. Theta waves characterize growing brain tumors, and so it was the only non-invasive way in the past to detect a brain tumor without surgery. Alpha is related to relaxed alertness, happiness, particularly at the back of the head. Alpha increases at the back of the head will increase happiness reliably, and if alpha reduced there, people will become more unhappy. It increases creativity, goes up with orgasm. It's seen in meditation and prayer, in the states, the profound states in Zen, superconscious state of Satori, and yoga, it's samadhi, are also characterized by super high alpha all over the head. We don't want to do much with beta because it's hard focus, busy mind, stress, and worry. Gamma is seen elevated significantly in compassion meditation. Here are the basic types of brainwaves. And here's an example of brainwaves before and after the Biocybernaut training. This was a depressed 74-year-old woman beforehand, and here are her brainwaves after. Now, you can see this is the back of the head, and it goes to the front of the head. Back of the head going to the front of the head from occipital to frontal locations. And you don't need a medical degree or knowledge of rocket science to see that there is quite a difference after 7 days of Biocybernaut neurofeedback training. The requirements for the technology are there must be immediate, accurate, and aesthetic. Immediate is defined in patents as less than 350 milliseconds. The feedback sound must come on after the brain event. The accuracy is defined as filters which must be at least 400 decibel per octave roll-off. And aesthetic, of course, de gustibus non est disputandum, but it should be non-disruptive, and we use musical tones for the feedback. So as you expand your ability to increase your brainwaves, your brain is being heard as flutes and oboes and organs and clarinets and saxophones. And as you go into the higher levels of the training, there are 9 levels of the alpha, you get progressively a greater suite of instruments. Method is very important. The ergonomic technology, of course, is a part of that. The methodology must be optimized. You could not do this training coming 1 day a month for 7 months or 1 day a week for 7 weeks. It's only effective in a mass practice situation where people come for 12 to 14 hours per day, 7 consecutive days. And then very important is the transformational perspective of the trainer. Now, as we look at applications, neurofeedback is effective in taking people away from dysfunction and toward hyperfunction. Now, if somebody comes in as a basket case, you don't maybe expect they're going to walk out as a radiant being in Satori or Samadhi, but we have been very effective in drug and alcohol treatment programs, chronic pain, geriatrics, diabetes, high blood pressure, stress reduction management, personality therapy, relationship repair, couples coaching, and ADD and ADHD. Now, at the hyperfunction range, we can do things like meditation and spiritual development, corporate training, wellness, athletic peak performance, creativity enhancement, IQ boosting, education and mastery, virtual reality entertainment, and research into mind, brain, being functions, and additional applications like shared feedback, where 2 or more people go into the chamber at the same time and literally get on the same wavelength while they literally make beautiful music together. And we have it on the authority of Army Intelligence, U.S. Army Intelligence, which sent some officers for this, that there were telepathic exchanges between the officers when they were doing the Biocybernaut shared feedback. Patents include the ergonomic technology and optimized training protocol, and the know-how is the transformational perspective of the trainers. Now, we have a thing called computerized mood scales. It's very important to identify the source of the traumas, which technology is exquisite at healing. And so what we do is we administer, while people are wired up sitting in the chamber, computerized mood scales where they respond to hundreds of adjectives, feeling words, 0 to 4, or yes or no. And the computer, a program which I wrote, will identify emotions that exist within the person which are below the level of conscious awareness. This can be negative as well as positive emotion. Now, what a waste to have positive emotions like, say, trusting, devotion, things like that, and not know it. But it's even worse if you have negative emotions of which you are unaware, because then they sabotage your daily activities. So once the negative emotions have been turned up in the coaching sessions following the neurofeedback chamber sessions, people review their list of words which the computer identified as emotions that they denied, which the computer thought that they had. And this turns up the targets for forgiveness, typically. I've developed a 14-step forgiveness method, which allows people to go through briefly experiencing the pain of the trauma and then going into forgiveness. Now, George Gallup, perhaps the most famous pollster in America, has done a number of polls on forgiveness, finding that 80% of Americans find forgiveness is extremely important, given choices not at all, a little, moderately, quite a bit, and extremely. 80% extremely important. But if he asked those who felt it was extremely important, could they do forgiveness on their own, 85% of the people said no. The only thing that prayer didn't even correlate with effective forgiveness. The only thing that correlated with effective forgiveness was meditative prayer. Now, when you take the adverb meditative and you put it in front of any verb, like meditative golfing, meditative sailing, meditative gardening, meditative whatever, meditative meditating, what I see are more alpha waves. So in other words, George Gallup has told us that effective forgiveness requires increasing alpha waves. So the biocybernaut 14-step forgiveness method instructs people not to go into the forgiveness part of the process. You identify the perpetrator, you bring him into court, you charge him, you feel the pain, but you do not go into the forgiveness until you have attained certain brainwave states, which are indicated on a screen, which lights up every 2 minutes as you sit there in the dark doing this auditory feedback process. And so the forgiveness that you do is done only in a brainwave state known to be conducive to effective forgiveness, and thus it's very, very powerful. Training Zen mind, allowing people to open their heart. We might ask, what would be the value of a psychic mood detecting computer? Because these computers that we use for the mood scales, in a way, act like psychics. Now, they do it scientifically, reliably, according to algorithms I've developed, and so it's repeatable, it's within science and math, but what it does is it gives the trainer, the coach, the benefits of psychic-like insights into what's going on in the unconscious regions of that person's mind. So neurofeedback plus psychic insights lead to faster spiritual growth, faster healing of traumas. So Thrive, body thriving. Well, it's helpful to avoid nicotine, alcohol, garlic, onions, shallots, scallions, and leeks. These activate a rajasic temperament. I referenced the 3 gunas. Here's a paper on how garlic is actually a brain poison, so you can pull that up from your copy of the slide. Body thriving, reversing brain aging. Most people have an interest in reversing aging, particularly of the brain. Turns out that after the onset of arteriosclerosis, there's an 0.8 of a hertz slowing of the alpha waves for every 10 years of life. When alpha's gone, then you go into theta and delta dementias. A hospital admission study in Southern California showed that 50% of all admitted to the hospital with a non-alpha record were dead 6 months later. And Dr. Charles Yeager, a very famous clinical electroencephalographer who set up the mental health hospital system all over California, I think 35 different hospitals with EEG labs. One time at lunch he was saying, you know, Jim, if I was sitting with a 103-year-old patient and he had good alpha in his record, I knew he would be alive when I came back next year. On the other hand, if it was a 27-year-old person and their alpha had diminished or had gone, I would say a very special goodbye to that person, knowing they were unlikely to be alive next year when he came back on his rounds. So alpha is indeed related to your prognosis for longevity. Mind thriving. Okay, we did a study with Stanford Research Institute scientists, and we found that alpha training produced not only reductions of physiological and psychological stress, but there was a 50% increase in their creativity. Some of them solved in that week of alpha training problems that had stumped them for 2 years. Here's that paper if you like to read it. Mind thriving, we also measured IQ before and after the training and found that there were both increases in both auditory verbal IQ and mathematical logical IQ. And for example, we use the Kaufman Adolescent and Adult Intelligence Test. And I'll just run through, you can look at these in more detail. Analysis methods included t-statistic with 2 means with unequal n, paired t-statistic for a set of paired observations, and the product moment correlation. For example, here was a comparison of the pre and post IQ scores. And we have a p-level there, which is very, very highly significant, the kind of significance you rarely see in psychological science. Significant increases in all dimensions. Crystallized IQ, the maximum increase was 39 points. Fluid IQ, 23 points, and the composite, 19 points. So now I'm just going to zip through these slides, knowing you can see them later if you get a copy. A mind-thriving IQ increases in auditory IQ. In the verbal IQ, there was an improved auditory comprehension, better listening, more understanding, more accurate recall. And in the mathematical logical, there was better analytical ability, better reasoning, and better pattern recognition. And intriguingly, and I might call your attention to the bottom of the screen here, there were these IQ benefits were not related to the elapsed time from when they did the first test to the second test. So the result was stable out to at least a year. There was no correlation with chronological age. People who were in their 10 or 12 had similar boosts in IQ to those people who were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there was no correlation with the pre-IQ. So it helped dummies and geniuses and average people equally. Now, how about emotions thriving? The reductions in psychopathology in 1 week are in fact shocking. Here is, for those of you who know the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, kind of a granddaddy of personality tests, the normal 50 percentile is right here, and the normal range is from 70 to 30. So anything above that is considered psychopathology. And so what we have here is the pre and the post. And I apologize, this slide was just added last night. I had it sent from my Canadian facility so I could put it in the presentation. You can see that this blizzard of dots up here are almost gone in the post. So psychopathology, schizophrenia, paranoia, psychasthenia in the 98th, 99th percentile after 1 week of this training can be in the middle of the normal zone. So it's very profound. Shocking. Here was a study done with Canadian Aboriginals, of highly abused people because of the residential schools where the children were kept 12 months a year and raped and beaten and by other students and also by the priests and nuns who ran this up until the late 80s. And they are as traumatized a people as returning war veterans. And so I have a copy of this. The PDF that's included here is this paper. I do have a 10 or 20. Miguel, could you stand up for just a moment? Miguel has copies of the paper if you'd like a hard copy of it. Reductions in psychopathology across the board on a variety of measures, such that Andrew Campbell, the editor of this journal, asked for copies of the raw data, saying, this is quite extraordinary. After he got the raw data, he said he wanted to come and do the training. And I said, Dr. Campbell, of course, why? He said, as editor of 2 peer-reviewed medical journals, I have hundreds of papers cross my desk every week. The best of these show benefits to a small segment of the population and only on a few of the measures. I've looked at your raw data. You are helping everyone, and all of the measures show the benefits. He said, these are not baby steps, these are elephant steps. The paper was published in 2012, I believe. There was also a paper I did published in Science Magazine, the American counterpart to the prestigious journal Nature, and you can have a copy here. High anxiety college-age males reduce both state and trait anxiety with appropriate alpha training. I also did training with U.S. Army Green Berets on a secret Army base, and this paper will describe the transformative benefits of the training for this unique group of people. Now, spirit thriving. I have a paper here on the left. Alpha feedback is closer to Zen than to yoga in results. And the paper on the right is a classic study done in Japan by Kasamatsu and Harai, showing the brainwave changes of Zen, beginning, intermediate, and advanced, in both Soto and Rinzai Zen, the two main branches of Zen. And what this showed was that 7 days of this alpha brainwave training at biocybernaut allows you to produce the same pattern of brainwave changes as if you were advanced Zen. Minimum number of time to attain that in Japan is 21 years, and some people had to go as long as 40 years. So we say this is 21 to 40 years of Zen in a week. Gallup poll on forgiveness, we spoke about that a little bit. A Zen Master came and did the training, said it enhanced his practice of Zen, doubled his understanding of the dimensionality of consciousness, said it was his duty to work with biocybernaut, and actually moved to the US. Wrong practice does not make perfect. Many people sit in the chamber, try their meditation, find it lowers their alpha. They are not doing meditation. One TM study found 60% of the people napping instead of meditating. Biocybernaut training changes wrong practice to right practice. And yes, I did a scientific paper on the topic of I know what the physiological basis of a halo is. If you show me somebody who has a halo, I can make measurements of it and then calculate backwards and tell you what pattern of brainwaves have to be present in order to have a halo of that size and orientation. And the way I found this was I started out with a recording of 30 different Zen monks, including a very famous Zen master. In 1971, I made these graphs, beginner, middle, advanced, and then the Zen Master. And one of the things that you see here in the coherence is a simultaneous theta and alpha coherence, a simultaneous theta and alpha coherence between the occipitals and also between the temporals. Now, it took me until 1991 to learn at a conference on chaos theory as applied to analysis of brainwaves that when you convolve two coherent signals, you will get in phase space, and any electrical engineer at the PhD level will confirm this, you will get a torus in phase space. When I heard that, I jumped out of my seat in this audience of 1,500 people and shouted from the back of the room, I've got 2 people in my database who show that pattern. One was a Zen Master, and another one was who was a successor to the Roshi, was given transmission 7 years later after these recordings when the Zen Master died, and he had a little bit of that bimodal coherence pattern. And so this led to a lot of interesting sequelae, including a week at a safe house by the CIA where I was allowed to talk about this and share and so on. Okay, so here we have it. It will take 107 biocybernaut brainwave training chambers to train all 31,000 adult Gurns by 2020. I have a detailed model that can open 300 chambers in just 3 years. We have trainings available. Miguel and I will be leading trainings in Germany in October and November. There's my personal cell, and here's the call numbers for Canada, Germany, and USA where we have these locations. Thank you. So the purpose of the wand is to stir up interest and resources which is deep in Guernsey and bring them into the fulfillment of all of your hopes and dreams.